Hi friends, we at GLC would like to take a quick moment to thank you for watching our programs on this platform, and we'd like to ask you for a little favor. Would you please go beneath this video and click the subscribe button? Did you know that by simply subscribing to the GLC YouTube channel, you can help us financially support the programs on this platform? You'll need to be signed into YouTube beforehand, but if not, simply click the subscribe button and YouTube will automatically walk you through the steps to sign in or to create an account. By taking these simple steps, you will not only ensure that you continue to receive our unique programming and gain instant access to the hundreds of videos we post, but more importantly, you'll also be telling YouTube that GLC's content is worth watching and promoting. Likewise, if you enjoyed a specific program, please click the thumbs up button below, which also helps inform YouTube that this is a program worth recommending. Finally, once you have logged in and subscribed, please click the notification bell below in order to receive announcements when we post new content. As usual, feel free to post your questions and comments in the comments section below. We always love hearing from our friends and viewers. Again, thank you for watching and supporting God's Learning Channel. We couldn't spread the message of the gospel without you. Be blessed, and we hope you enjoy the show.
Shalom once again. Welcome back to the Wild Branch Ministry, and welcome back to another episode of Ezekiel's Wheel. Last time, actually, I don't know what exactly we were talking about last time, but we're just going to continue on this time with this cycles of Genesis that we were talking about. So one might want to naturally ask, well, exactly what are the cycles of Genesis? Well, I've tried to express this earlier, but we're not just talking about the things that we see in nature. I mean, I think that's specifically what's being referred to here is that how everything operates in the universe began in Genesis. In the beginning is a good place to begin, by the way, in case you want to figure that out. And so not only are we talking about the sun and the moon and the stars and the planets and our cells and our body and how seeds operate and so on and so forth, but what I'm proposing to you once again is that the Father's ways of teaching us is also operates in cycles. So primarily, there's four things I'm going to name specifically that I believe that are begun in Genesis, and they're taught over and over and over again in a very cyclical way. And some of them I already mentioned, but they're all in the first four chapters of Genesis. One is his feast. His feast are all brought forth in the first four chapters of Genesis. That's why the sun, the moon, and the stars and so forth were put in the heavens in order to be for our appointments and our seasons and our festivals and so forth. And then we have, of course, his dietary laws are also there. As a matter of fact, 17 times in the first four chapters of Genesis, 17 times the concept of his food and his laws are mentioned in those opening chapters as well. Obviously, Shabbat, the weekly Sabbath, given in Genesis chapter 2, also begins in the first four chapters. And of course, we also have the revelation of his name there, Yod-He-Vav-He. And now the reason I bring up those four particular ones, even though they all began there, the reason I bring up those four is because those are the ones that always make the headlines. Those are the ones that always are part of the controversies. They're always on the front page of the controversy papers, if you will. Because when it comes to dealing with your religious friends and so forth, or even just one religious system to another, that seems to be the one that you always have to deal with your religious friends. And that is the festivals, the dietary laws, his name and so forth, and Shabbat. Now, the reason I bring that up is because even though everything cyclical is brought forth from the beginning, including the laws of menstruation and so forth, that women have, is because you'll notice that later on in Scripture, those are always the four things that come up over and over and over again. I mean, of all the things that are talked about that operate in a very cyclical way in the very beginning, it seems to be those four that are going to show up again in Judges and Ruth, in Samuel, in the Kings, in the book of Psalms and Proverbs. We get into Isaiah and Zechariah and Jeremiah. Even when we get into the New Testament, why are your disciples eating the corn in the field? Whatever, on the Sabbath day. It's those four things that come up all the time. Those seem to always grab the headlines. Those are the controversial ones. So that's mainly the reason why I bring that up. But they all begin in Genesis. Now, we are reading Ezekiel once again. And Ezekiel chapter 1, what I kind of want to do is sum up, instead of doing a line by line, word by word, because we need to really get down and cut to the chase of this thing now as we begin closing in on Ezekiel's wheel. I want to kind of give a general description of what's going to be revealed to us in Ezekiel chapter 1. Okay, so Travis, if you can bring up the screen now. This is basically a kind of a summation of the things that are talked about with this wheel within a wheel in the first chapter of Ezekiel. Number one, we are told that the word of Yahweh comes to Ezekiel expressly. We're going to talk about these things in a few minutes, but we also have a revelation that it's a man. It's the image of a man with four faces moving forward. Remember, not turning to the right or turning to the left. The four faces are a man, a lion, an ox, and an eagle. And on the earth, it is a wheel. On the earth, it is a wheel within a wheel, a trachon, word used in James, within a trachon. We see that it's full of eyes. It sees and understands everywhere. It's looking throughout all the earth. The spirit of this man, because it's the image of a man, is in the wheels. And we're also told that where the Spirit goes, that's where the wheels go. And so they follow, they're led, if you will, by the Spirit, if I can use that word. And their voice is like the voice of the Almighty. And we are also told to take this to the rebellious children of Israel. Now leave this up here, Travis, because I want to go to the only other place in Scripture which uses the phrase that something came to someone expressly. It's in 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 1. In 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 1, here's what it says. Now the Spirit speaketh expressly. And here's that phrase again. That in the latter times some shall depart from the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils. Now the logical question that a person would want to ask is, when did the Spirit say this? When did the Spirit speaketh expressly that in the latter times some shall depart from the faith? I'm going to propose to you that all over the Tanakh we are told what will befall God's people in the latter times, particularly here in Deuteronomy chapter 31, verses 29 and 30. Here's what it says. I know, this is Moses speaking, that after my death you will utterly corrupt yourselves and turn aside from the way which I commanded you, and evil will befall you in the latter days, because ye will do evil in the sight of Yahweh, to provoke him to anger through the work of your hands. And Moses spoke in the ears of all the congregation of Israel the words of this song until they were ended. Now come on back to me, Travis. Now once again, the logical question that a person would ask is, when did the Spirit expressly speak those things? Back in the times of Moses, he already warned us what would happen to us in the latter days. And if you read on in 1 Timothy chapter 4, there's going to be certain characteristics of those people who are being led and seduced by spirits and doctrines of demons and so forth. And of course, one of those things is going to be forbidding to marry and things like that. And I think at some time in the future, here very quickly, we're going to go into a lot of the things that people say Paul said, in which he was trying to teach that those things were done away with. And one of those is going to occur in 1 Timothy chapter 4, verses 1 through 5. And we will cover that in much detail later on. But meanwhile, let's continue and bring that back up on the screen, Travis. Also in Deuteronomy chapter 32, it continues on and says, they have corrupted themselves. Their spot is not the spot of his children. They are a perverse and crooked generation. Then he says, on to verse 7, remember the days of old. Consider the years of many generations. Ask your father, and he will show you, and your elders, and they will tell you. Once again, bringing us back to these things that were said, come on back to me, Travis, back in the days of Moses. They were already told these things. They were already told that he would establish a day with them. Bring it back up again. Travis, bring it back up again. Deuteronomy 29. I'm going back 2 chapters. I wasn't going to do this, but let's go ahead and do it. Going back 2 chapters, we're still in the same section of Scripture. He says that he may establish you today for a people unto himself, and that he may be unto you a God, as he hath said unto you, and as he hath sworn unto your fathers, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. Neither with you only do I make this covenant and this oath, but also with him that stands here with us this day before Yahweh our God, and also with him that is not here with us this day. So in other words, come back to me, Travis. In other words, not only is it going to be to those people standing there, but it's going to be all the strangers and sojourners that were with them, that were grafted in with them. And so he's also speaking to those who were not here in those days. And so he's going to do the same thing in the book of Judges as well. Bring that up now, Travis. In the book of Judges, or Shoftim, I want you to get this idea of constantly teaching every generation. We're just going to give some examples, the same thing. Shoftim, or Judges 2, verses 19 through 20 says, and it came to pass, when the judge was dead, that they returned and corrupted themselves more than their fathers. So now we have another generation going to do the same thing. In following other gods to serve them and to bow down unto them, they ceased not from their own doings, nor from their stubborn ways. And the anger of Yahweh was hot against Israel. And he said, because that this people have transgressed my covenant, which I commanded their fathers, and have not hearkened unto my voice. In Isaiah, chapter 1, verse 4. O sinful nation, a people laden with iniquity, a seed of evildoers, children that are corrupters. They have forsaken Yahweh, they have provoked the Holy One of Israel unto anger, and they are gone away backwards. So as you can see, that generation after generation, even when we get into the prophets now, the same problem occurs with every generation. In Hosea 9, verse 9, they have deeply corrupted themselves as they did in the days of Gibeah. Therefore he will remember their iniquity, and he will visit their sins. So now we go up to the book of Hosea, same thing going on. Acts chapter 20, let's get into the New Testament now, verses 29 and 30. For I know this, that after my departing, this is Paul speaking now in Acts, he said, now does this sound familiar? Because Moses, centuries and centuries before that, also said, now I already know. It's the Father revealing to his people what the Father already knows that people are going to constantly do. So Paul says the same thing. After my departing shall grievous wolves enter in among you, not sparing the flock. Also of your own selves shall men arise, speaking perverse things to draw away disciples after them. The same thing is going to continue. 1 Corinthians 11, verses 1 and 2. However, what does Paul say? Even though he knows what's going to happen after his departing, grievous wolves are going to come into you. And of course, Yeshua is going to describe those earlier actually as wolves in sheep's clothing. In other words, they're going to appear on the outside to be sheep, but on the inside they are ravening wolves. Once again, corrupting themselves, turning away. But Paul taught us in 1 Corinthians 11, verses 1 and 2, he says, I quoted this earlier, be followers of me, even as I am also of the Messiah. Now I praise you, brethren, that you remember me in all things and keep the ordinances as I delivered them to you. Now once again, the same words are used in the beginning. This is not the Greek word dogma. We're going to talk about that later when we talk about the things that Paul said concerning the English word ordinances, which there is translated as dogma. Here it's the Hebrew word for traditions, things that are handed down from one generation to the next. So Paul's saying once again, follow me and be ye followers of me. Now let's go back to Ezekiel's wheel. We not only have the word of Yahweh comes to Ezekiel expressly, warning them what's going to happen to the people in the latter times. It's all over the Old Testament. It's all over the New Testament. But now we're going to be shown that this is a man, is the image of a man with faces moving forward. In Ezekiel 1 verse 5 it says, also out of the midst thereof came the likeness of 4 living creatures, and this was their appearance. They had the likeness of a man. So in other words, even though it's going to have 4 faces, one of them being a man, the whole appearance of it is going to be the likeness of a man. And I'm going to propose to you that that man is Yeshua. Let's go back to this one. Yeshua himself is the man that's going to be represented as having these four faces, because these four faces are also going to be revealed in the Gospels. Now, before we get into the Gospels, let's leave it up there, Travis. I want to remind you of the concept of the number 4 in Scripture. Even though we haven't done a big, long, heavy-duty study in numbers here, which we probably will do someday, 4 is generally agreed on by Jewish and Christian theologians and commentators as being a number that represents all of something, like all of the earth, for example. The number 4 is a number that encompasses the idea of all of the earth, like north, south, east, and west, earth, wind, fire, and water. We have spring, summer, autumn, and winter. Of the moon, we have the 4 lunar phases of the moon. In the book of Genesis, chapter 10, we have all the peoples of the earth divided up into their lands, their tongues, and their families and the nations. And of course, many times in the Scriptures, we have spoken of people being scattered to the 4 corners of the earth. So the thing I wanted to get across here is the concept of 4 meaning something that is encompassing all of everything. Now we also realize that this image, the likeness of a man, has 4 faces. Now here are the 4 faces. They're a face of a man, a lion, and an ox, and an eagle. Now, it just so happens that these same 4 faces are going to be also repeated in Revelation chapter 4, which we will get to in a little bit, when there's a description of the Ancient of Days, if you will, on the throne in Revelation chapter 4. Now, it just so happens, keeping this concept of all in mind, that all 12 tribes of Israel are represented by 4. Remember, when they're surrounding the tabernacle with the Levites in the middle and so forth, they divide all of the 12 tribes into 4 camps. The camp of Reuben, the camp of Judah, the camp of Ephraim, and the camp of Dan. And it just so happens that Reuben is to the south, Judah is to the east, Ephraim is to the west, and Dan is to the north. And so we have all 4 directions represented here as they surround the tabernacle. We have these 4 characters represented by banners. Each one of the tribes was represented by these emblems on these banners and so forth as well. And it just so happens that in the tribe of Reuben was represented by a man. As a matter of fact, Reuben means to see a son. To see a son. Literally is what the word Reuben means. Judah, of course, is represented by a lion. Ephraim was represented by an ox, and Dan was represented by an eagle. Now, these are the things that were on the banner, even though Dan was called a serpent and so on and so forth. We're talking about the emblem on the banners that each tribe has. As a matter of fact, you can Google the banners of those 4 tribes on the internet if you wish, and it will show you that these are what represented all 4 of those. Now, once again, this happens to be the same 4 images that's on these cherubim and so forth, and these faces and this wheel within a wheel. Now, it's also true that Yeshua, our Messiah, was represented and expressed by 4 Gospels. 4 Gospels. Not 3, not 2, not 1, not one story, but rather to divide it up into 4 Gospels. The book of Luke, let me erase that little message that comes up there once in a while. The book of Luke represents Yeshua as a man. That's the reason why you get all the details of Yeshua's life. We get more details about his birth, Luke chapter 1 through chapter 4 and so forth, through his gospel. And so he is represented from the south and by Reuben and represents Yeshua as a man. Matthew, of course, has all the kingdom parables in it. Kings reign on thrones, the king, the lion, so on and so forth. So it's represented as a lion. So Matthew presents Yeshua as a lion when he describes him. Mark, however, represents Yeshua as a servant, the kind of son of man kind of thing. An ox, of course, was as an animal, a burden, a servant, which is represented through Ephraim. And of course, John represents Yeshua as an eagle. That's why his description or his gospel is very heavenly minded. There's a lot of the deep things of the aspect of the Messiah are revealed, as if an eagle soaring high over the top of all things. Now, why am I bringing this up? Because once again, the picture of 4 is the idea that this entire image of Yeshua is represented by not just a man, and he's not just a lion, he's not an ox, and not just an eagle, but he's all 4 of those. It represents all 4 directions upon the earth, knowing that his people, the lost tribe, the lost sheep of the house of Israel, were scattered all over the earth from the north to the south and the east and the west. And that you can't understand, I don't know how that happened, but you can't understand Yeshua just through Luke. And you can't understand who our Messiah is just through Mark or through John. But it's all 4 Gospels that present to us this image of who the Messiah is through Luke, Matthew, Mark, and John. Now, if you remember earlier, we talked about, go ahead and leave this up, Travis. We talked about the 4 levels of interpretation, if you remember. The Peshat, the Remez, the Drash, and the Sod. So once again, to try to understand what a biblical passage says only through the literal meaning, you're not getting the whole picture. You're not getting the whole picture of what's being trying to be betrayed or to be portrayed there, not betrayed, portrayed in the verse. And you can't just do it by looking at it prophetically, which is the remez part of it, but rather to understand the fullness of what the verse has to say, you need to see it in a Peshat, a Remez, a Drash, and a Sod. It's all 4 that give you that image as well. And finally, in Ephesians chapter 3, I believe I have that up there. Let's see if it's up there. There it is. In Ephesians chapter 3, verses 18 and 19, Paul's going to tell us the same thing, only he's going to use the words breadth, length, depth, and height. And hear what he says. He says that you may be able to comprehend with all the saints what is the breadth, the length, the depth, and the height, and to know the love of Messiah, which passes knowledge. Now, I want to stop and say, what he's trying to say there is our human knowledge. Instead of trying to understand who the Messiah is and who our deliverer is only through our minds, because our minds are corrupt. We need to be restored back to his mind. So, when we understand who he is through all 4 Gospels, through all 4 interpretive methods, through the breadth and the length and the depth and the height, then we can know the love of the Messiah, which not only passes knowledge, but then ye might be filled with all the fullness of God. That you may be filled with all the fullness of God is also what he's teaching. Come on back to me, Travis. Now, once again, I want to remind you that what we are trying to do is show these image of these wheels within these wheels. And we haven't even gotten to the wheels now. Next week, we're probably going to conclude this by actually getting into the wheels. And I'm going to show you how chariot wheels are designed and what in the world all of this has to do with corrupting or defiling the course of nature in James chapter 3. Remember, that's where we started with, is that Yaakov, or James, is trying to tell us that there's going to be these teachers in the latter days, and they're going to try to corrupt and destroy the beginning, which is where the foundations are, in the very beginning. And so in order to corrupt the end, once again, the idea is to go back and corrupt the very beginning. And so if all these things started as cycles, they will continue to be that way. Once again, you cannot ignore the fact that this is the way everything operates on the planet, is according to these cycles. So when we get to Revelation chapter 4, let's bring up on the screen here real quick, Travis, as we end this episode. When we get once again to the throne, I kind of quoted this before, but I want you to see it here. It says, and before the throne there was a sea of glass like unto crystal. And in the midst of the throne and round about the throne were 4 beasts full of eyes before and behind, The first beast, now this word beast here in the Greek, and as we take it back into Hebrew, is the word for a living being. It's what it's talking about. I don't want you to get you the image of these creatures and beasts as something out of some horror movie or something, all right? But rather, these are living beings. So surrounding this throne is living beings. The first one is like a lion. The second one is like a calf. The third one has the face of a man, and the fourth one was like a flying eagle. And that's the image that's given to you in Revelation chapter 4. So the same thing is repeated there as well. Now remember, going back to Ezekiel's wheel, within a wheel, we have the word of Yahweh coming to Ezekiel expressly, and he warns us about what's going to happen in the latter times. Then we have this man with four faces moving forward. Once again, the prophecy is he's not going to go to the right and he's not going to go to the left. He's going to stay exactly where the Spirit tells them to go. It's going to be a man, a lion, an ox, and an eagle, which is a full picture of who the Messiah is. He's going to be full of eyes, meaning he's looking all over the earth for his lost sheep. And when he does, once again, multitudes of Gentiles are going to join themselves with them when they come out. The spirit of the man was in the wheels. And where the spirit went, Ezekiel says, that's where the wheels went. They went where the Spirit led them. It goes on to say that their voice was like the voice of the Almighty, and you were going to take this to the rebellious children of Israel. And so in Ezekiel chapter 2, verse 3, that's where it says, and he said unto me, Son of man, I send you to the children of Israel, to a rebellious, or to, actually there's no A there in the Hebrew, to rebellious nations that have rebelled against me. In your King James English it says to the children of Israel, to a rebellious nation. But in the Hebrew it's goyim, it's in the plural there. Why? Because the children of Israel have been scattered in among the nations. And they have mixed with their ways, not only physically, okay, but their religious, everything has been all mixed together. And it says, they have rebelled against me. They and their fathers have transgressed against me, even unto this very day. And so that's the reason, you can come on back to me now, that's the reason why this this vision is going to be given to Ezekiel, because the Father already knows what his children has done. And he's desperately in every generation trying to reach out to his people to bring them back into his house, to bring them out of their house and live in his house, because the Father, according to Genesis chapter 9, dwells in the tents of Shem. And so he's not only trying to bring a wandering Shem back into the tent, but he's trying to bring those believers out of the tents of Japheth and Ham into the tents of Shem. And we'll talk some more about Ezekiel's wheels. We actually draw it next time. So in the meantime, cling to your roots that your days may be long, and you will prosper in everything you set your hand to do. Shalom Aleichem. See you next time.